guys, welcome back. Last time we talked about how the EEOC system is broken, and one of the biggest ways that it's broken is how slow it is. Now, in honor of Martin Luther King Day yesterday, I want to talk about that today, starting with a quote from Dr. King that a lot of you have shared with me.
Justice too long delayed is justice denied.
I am not comparing my personal EEOC fight with the level of oppression that Dr. King was up against, because they are not the same. But I can relate, and I bet most of you can too. Truth is truth, after all. My case lasted 6 years, and if I hadn't been able to retire when I did and escape, that would have meant another 6 years of discrimination and abuse. Now, most of you know that EEOC isn't in the business of stopping discrimination. The best they can do is give us some compensation for the harm we suffered after the fact. Now, I got the maximum non-pecuniary award from EEOC, and while I was happy with that, was it really justice? Let me share a few of the things that I went through to get that money, and you decide. I had IBSD. And one of the things that I asked for as reasonable accommodation was to be allowed to go clean myself properly after a flare-up and make up the time later that day. I was already on a flexible schedule that would have allowed me to do that, so I thought it would be a no-brainer. And on days when I woke up with my IBS flaring, I asked to telework so that I didn't have to risk a flare-up at work. I was already approved for telework too, so again, I thought that would be a no-brainer. Now, even though my boss had never had a problem with either of those things, when I asked to use them to address my medical difficulties, it was a hard no from her. So for about 2 years, about twice a week, that's about 200 days overall, when my IBSD flared, I wasn't allowed to clean up. I had to stay in my office in my soiled clothing and do my job like everything was normal. And on days when my IBSD was flaring, I had to go into the office knowing I was going to have a problem later that day. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I felt subhuman. Our discrimination continues while our claims slowly work their way through the EEOC process. And on top of the original discrimination, most of us have to deal with retaliation and hostility to boot. My boss retaliated by yelling at me and asking me humiliating questions about my IBSD in front of my peers, by accusing me of things that I didn't do and then threatening to fire me over them, taking away my engineering duties and replacing them with menial duties like flipping PowerPoint charts for her in meetings all day. She tried to set me up to fail at my job, ignored even the most minor requests that I made, and micromanaged my trips to the restroom. And she joked about how disabled workers are broken and should be thrown away. And that's not even close to everything I went through, but you get the idea. It was a lot of abuse. And the EEOC process itself actually adds to the abuse. There's the stress of having to jump through all the right hoops at all the right times and say all the right things in all the right ways. The constant frustration of having to deal with delays from both our employer and EEOC. The strain of having to find and afford an attorney, and the constant worry that after all that, we're still going to lose. So was the amount of compensation I got from EEOC really worth all the abuse I had to put up with?
Oh, hell no!
But I didn't have a lot of alternatives. Dr. King was right. Justice too long delayed is justice denied. Don't get me wrong, the money is nice to have and I am grateful for it. But justice? To me, justice would have been separating me from my abuser and protecting me from unnecessary harm for the years that EEOC took to decide my case. Justice would have been having my boss and the diversity manager pay some consequences for intentionally violating the law instead of getting rewarded and promoted for it and letting the taxpayers pay. And justice would have been forcing NASA to fix their broken reasonable accommodation process so that future workers didn't have to go through the same thing I did. Unfortunately, none of that ever happened. I got some money, and that's it. They say the wheels of justice turn slowly, and at EEOC they turn really slowly. Meanwhile, the wheels of harm keep turning at full speed and run right over us. And for that reason, I'd never tell any of you that you have to take up this fight. I mean, that's a personal decision. There's all kinds of reasons that some of us just can't fight. But for those of you who are fighting, I want you to know that I really appreciate what you're doing. It's not easy fighting for justice in an unjust system. But if none of us ever fight, none of us ever win, and nothing ever changes. And occasionally, we do win and end up getting some compensation for what we went through. That may not be justice, but it is better than nothing. I'll see you guys next time. Till then, take care and keep hanging in.